Good afternoon, everybody. This is Mike Farley, Poolside Perspective Podcast, and we have another episode coming to you today about water safety. May is Water Safety Month, and we're trying to provide as much details as possible so you can be informed, and then you can share it with others and help other people be informed. And so that's the educational process we're trying to go through here, and just make people aware of different things to consider when you're doing your outdoor living space, especially when there's water involved. So last week we talked about pool covers. So if you got a question about pool covers, almost all those questions are going to be answered in last week's episode. But there was one thing that came up that someone called me about and asked me a question about, and they said, so is this a safety cover? And what they were describing was something that looks like bubble wrap that's floating on top of the water. They said, I've seen that before. Is that something that's done for safety? And that's an emphatic no. In fact, that is probably one of the most unsafe covers that you can have around a swimming pool. So that cover is designed as a solar blanket. It is to help hold heat in and not let heat leave the water surface. So you're trying to keep a pool warm and warm it up in the spring and the fall. Sometimes you'll see them on hot tubs as well to help keep the wind blowing off of the surface as you're heating up the hot tub. So why I say emphatically no is this is a cover that really can create a sense of security with a lot of pets and small children because they think they can walk on it. And when they step on this, they will sink and the cover will then wrap around them. So this is the worst thing in the world that you can have around an area where there's a concern about safety with pets and small children is a solar blanket. So I would highly recommend with small children and animals that you not have a solar blanket, that you use some other things to heat your pool and make that more a safe environment to be considered. But it is not something that would be used ever from a safety standpoint. So we're going to talk about some things that would increase your safety. And so the pool industry recommends highly that you not rely on one thing for safety. What you want to look for is layers of safety. And the first layer of safety is an adult supervising the people that are by the pool. So that's your number one, okay, is you want someone outside that is going to be able to look after the safety of the people that are out there. Now, there's some requirements they suggest that these people have. They said they should be reasonably intelligent. Well, that's a good thing to have. You know, when you've got a lot of kids, you don't want the person that's unreasonably intelligent out there during that space. And they have ability and knowledge about swimming. So one of the things is they should be proficient in swimming. So that makes sense that you have someone out there that's going to watch them that is going to be comfortable around water. So when I was growing up, my mom was out around us all the time we were in a swimming pool. Well, she was not proficient in swimming, but she made sure that we were in an area that she could stand in if she had to jump in the pool. She had no problems jumping in the pool or jumping in the ocean as long as it wasn't over her head because she couldn't swim. But it works a whole lot better if you have someone that's proficient in swimming. And that person should be in the immediate vicinity of the pool, not like on the back porch underneath the cover that's, watching TV. They should be watching the pool and the people that are in the pool and having visual contact with the people in those areas. So as I mentioned earlier with Rowdy, one of the things that we did when we had parties as a family, especially when we had young kids, especially my son, when him and his young friends were over there, is we hired our daughter, who was a certified lifeguard, and she worked at the water park, and we would hire her to be the lifeguard out there. So she was the one that would watch them and make sure, when we're running back and forth into the house and, cooking and, prepping food and doing all kinds of things and being out by the pool as well as watching, but we were distracted. So we knew that us alone, that was not a good situation. So we would pay our daughter to sit out there and watch them and make sure that everything happened the way that we wanted it to. Rowdy mentioned also that you might have people that, if there's a large party, that each person takes 15 minutes and is in charge of watching the kids and just paying attention to what's going on around, not in conversation with other people, but just watching and protecting those individuals. And so then after 15 minutes, you rotate out of your shift and, it's all good. It's like me driving to Colorado when I was in college. We could all handle an hour of driving all night long to get where we wanted to go snow skiing. And so having a party where everybody's safe, everybody, contributes 15 minutes and watching everybody, it's a good situation to have, the kids where they're going to be under a careful eye and just so everybody's in a safe situation. So number one is you want to have some supervision. So number two, which we mentioned, is with like Step Up to Swim. And we found the cure for water safety, and that's swim lessons. So that's not part of their list here as a layer of protection, but we found that if people learn how to swim, then there's very little cases of drowning. So I'm going to add that as a second thing here. But the third thing here is you want to have some form of barriers. Okay, so barriers are to protect the pool from people that aren't being supervised. Okay, so we've got supervision, which is ideal, but what happens when somebody's not out in the backyard? How do we protect this, body of water from somebody just walking up to it? So the industry has said you have to have some form of barrier between the public and the swimming pool. So most of the time, that's known as a fence. So the fence, or it could be a wall, is in place that protects the pool area from the outside situation. So the other thing it can be is it can be a screen enclosure. And if those screen enclosures meet the requirements, also it could be a safety cover, such as the automatic covers that we talked about last time. So there are several things that could be to create the barrier between the public and the water. Now, you got to realize there's things that you want to do from a safety standpoint. There's also going to be codes. So the codes are going to be what's enforced by the city. And almost every city that I'm aware of in the United States requires that there is a fence around the pool. Now, some of these other things, like a cover, is a supplementary thing to a fence, but it doesn't eliminate the need for a fence. You still have to have a fence, and then you can have a cover as well. Instead of another supplement would be alarms, which we'll get to those in just a minute. So you could have it could be a fence, or it could be a wall that creates this barrier that you're going to have. So when you have a barrier, one of the things that you're going to have is some access into the space through the barrier. So you're going to have some type of fence. So when you have a fence, you're going to have a gate that allows you to go in and out of this space. So they have several rules about gates. Okay, your gates have rules. Okay, so your first thing about your gate is your gate has to self-close and self-latch. So how's that typically done? It's usually done by a big spring that's mounted onto the gate. And so when you push it open and you're trying to do yard work, it springs right back in your face, which is not a good thing when you're doing yard work, but it's a really important thing when you're trying to keep people safe. So you don't want to disconnect the spring because it's irritating. You just want to deal with the spring as it opens and shuts your gate. So your spring's going to automatically shut your gate, and you're going to have a latch on it, and it's going to automatically latch. Now, that latch has to be a certain height above the ground, which is 54 inches. So at 54 inches, the idea is that a small child isn't going to be able to reach up and undo this latch. And the other thing is, with the gate, is it always needs to swing outward. Now, why in the world do you want the gate to swing outward? And what does outward mean? Outward means outside of the pool area. So it's swinging out towards like the front yard. It's swinging out towards the property behind you. It's swinging out. And the reason why is if someone walks up and it's not latched and they push on it, it's automatically going to latch. And so that's the thought process with it. If someone pushes, which is the natural tendency when you come up to something, is it's going to latch the gate and therefore make it secure. So you have a gate that you can walk out of the space and push open, but when you're outside trying to get in, you have to pull it open. So you want this to be self-closing, self-latching, and it's got to swing out. And so those are the things that are required with a gate. So I know it's boring stuff, but this is really important to keep people protected and safe. So the latch, as I mentioned, has to be at least at 54 inches above the ground. So when you go through your gate, the other thing is sometimes people are like, well, I've got this big gate that we drive the camper through because the camper or the boat's parked in the backyard. So to make that self-latching and self-closing, that would be one big spring. So what they do is they realize that you're not going to have a spring that big. So, I mean, that would really catapult you if you pushed it open and it slammed back on you. So what you have is you have to secure that gate by some mechanism, which is usually a padlock. So if you put a padlock on that gate, then it will suffice and meet codes. So you want to make sure that the big gates as well as the small gates are all set up to protect individuals from getting into your backyard where your swimming pool is. And you're not supervising anybody, so that way it keeps everybody safe. So when we go into a space, a lot of times people are like, well, will a mesh fence work as a fence? And most cities do not allow a mesh fence to act as a fence or barrier because it's removable. So it can be a secondary barrier in the backyard, but it can't work as the primary around the property. Some cities will allow chain link. If the chain link is allowed, then the maximum opening in the chain link is 1 3/4 inch. So it has to be a fairly tight mesh. Some other things about the fencing that are required is you can't have a bigger opening than 4 inches between the pickets. Okay, so if you have like a wrought iron fence or a picket fence, the opening can't be bigger than 4 inches. The other thing is the pickets have to be what's called non-climbable, which means the pickets must run up and down, not horizontally side to side. Because if they run side to side, then it's just like a ladder. You can walk right up the top of it and walk down the other side. So they're like, that defeats the purpose. We want to make it hard for people to climb into this space. And so we're going to make it where you can't do that very easily. So one thing that's done in this part of the country is there's a lot of wood fences. And so with those wood fences, there's a lot of what's called a center rail on the fence. And so a lot of cities in this area, if the rails are on the outside, so you got the pretty part on the inside, the rails on the outside, or in your neighbor's yard, they want what's called a non-climb bar on that. So a non-climb bar is a piece of wood that's cut in a 45-degree angle, and it's nailed on top of that. So when somebody puts their foot on it, it slips off. Makes it really hard to climb that fence and look over the fence. So that way it makes it difficult for people to climb from one yard to the neighbor's yard. Now, so this is very commonly done like on a backyard that faces an alley. You want to have that situation set up because that is a semi-public space. People are in there all the time. But sometimes it is challenging when you're dealing with a neighbor and the neighbor's like, well, I've got a really pretty stained wood fence and I don't want you putting a non-climb on here. And so there are circumstances that I've run into. The city requires it. The neighbor won't allow it. And so you have to get something in writing from the neighbor that says, I'm not going to let you do this. And then the city will pass that. So it's something to be aware of. If your city has, like I said, this is really comes into play where you have a lot of wooden fences, which in Texas, it's really ironic that we have a lot of wooden fences, although we don't have a lot of trees around all over Texas. The general fence is a wood one. So that's something that's commonly required by different cities. You can also have what's called a welded wire fence. And welded wires, they call it horse fencing in a lot of places. So it'll be a wire mesh, and that mesh has to be a certain size as well, and that's allowed in some cities. But again, some cities won't allow chain link. Some cities won't allow welded wire mesh. You need to find out what your city requires. The other thing is the minimum height is typically 48 inches for a fence. But again, some cities will be 5 foot, 60 inches. Some people will be 6 foot or 72. So you have to understand what the codes are in your particular location. One thing that also has come up is a lot of times there's people that have a entry to the backyard from an alleyway for a vehicle. And so they have an automatic gate that opens and shuts. And so when that automatic gate comes into play, some cities will allow you to use an automatic gate if it closes within a certain amount of time. So it's like 15 seconds or 20 seconds or 30 seconds, the gate will automatically shut after you've gone through it. Some cities will require a secondary fence in between the driveway and the pool. So if you go into that space with the automatic gate, an individual can't get into the pool area still. So again, something to be considered as you look at different cities and different jurisdictions. We actually did a project just recently that was required. And so one of the cool things we did was we came in and used a synthetic boxwood on the fence in between the driveway and the pool area. And so from in the pool area, it looks like there's this big green hedge there. And when you drive in the gate, it looks like there's a big green hedge there. And so it looks really nice and clean and tailored, and it gives you a sense of privacy. And so when there's cars and vehicles parked on the driveway, you're not sitting in the pool looking at a bunch of vehicles parked there. Although some people have really cool vehicles and you'd like to see them. I saw that one pool the other day that they parked a Ferrari on the pool, which was a really cool look for someone that, has a Ferrari dealership, and I believe it's Miami. So some people like to look at their cars, but, in this circumstance, maybe, looking at a big green wall is a better situation. So anyway, so you have different barriers that you can consider, but a lot of it comes down to you're going to have a barrier. It's going to depend upon the city on what items that they allow and the particular codes that may come into place with those barriers that you have. So, as I mentioned, some cities, then after you have the barrier on the perimeter, you're going to have the wall of the house as part of the barrier. So you've got a fence on 3 sides that connects to the house, and so the house itself is one big barrier that eliminates people from coming in, except there's a door on the house that you can walk in the front door and you can walk out the back door and you can get access to that space. So just like gates, doors into houses have to have something that's required there. So there's a couple of different things that are required. So one is you would have a self-closing and latching door on all the doors that go into the outdoor space where the pool is. So very rarely do I see this done, although it is something that does meet code. So what most people have is some form of alarm that goes off when the door is opened. So when the door is opened, you've got so many seconds to push a button. Otherwise, the alarm goes off and chirps quite loudly, which is to protect the individuals in the home from small children opening that door and going into the outdoor space. So you've got your alarm that goes off, or you got your self-closing and latching doors. And some people are like, but I don't have any small children here. Why do I have to have an alarm? It's code. So at least it is with most cities. So that's something that has to be done from a barrier standpoint. So the other alternative that is sometimes in play is if you have a automatic cover on the pool, they will suffice to say you don't need alarms on the door. But again, as it is with fencing, codes are different with every city. And some of the cities will have exceptions to this. And so you have to check with what the individual city allows to protect the access through the house into the pool space. So we've now protected all the way around with a fence, or we could have a house wall that provides us things. But we're looking at different layers of protection to back up the primary means of accident prevention, which is responsible adult supervision. So going back to adult supervision. So if you're on your phone and checking your Instagram, you're probably not doing a great job of adult supervision. I'm sure a lot of people would like the hearts and the messages and all those type of things as you're checking out stuff on Instagram. But if you're the one that's in charge of watching the kids for 15 minutes and providing that layer of protection, I would say the phone probably needs to be somewhere else. Now, some people are like, well, it's good to have a phone in case you need to call somebody. So that may be true, but being on the phone wouldn't probably be responsible adult supervision. So we're going to try to keep everybody safe in this pool. So we're going to look at those layers of protection beyond the adult supervision. Just to recap real quickly, we talked about fencing. We've talked about automatic pool covers. We've talked about door exit alarms. We've also talked about self-closing and latching doors. We've talked about fence gates and latches. And we've talked about, we didn't talk about fence alarms. We're going to talk about alarms a lot more next week. And there's different pool alarms and child alarms, and we're going to hit on those some next week. But the other thing that you want to look at is the drains on the bottom of the pool. Okay, the drains on the bottom of the pool have been, I want to say, in the last 10, 12 years, there have been safety codes that have written for drains on the bottom of the pool. So the first thing to look at when you look at the bottom of the pool is you should have 2 drains. So if you have a really old pool, there's probably just one. And you're like, okay, what's the difference? So when you have 2, we have 2 points of suction in the pool, and generally they're 4 feet apart. And with 2 drains 4 feet apart, what happens if someone happens to cover the one drain, it doesn't create a point of suction, okay, because the water will just simply come through the other drain, okay? It's a very simple situation. However, if you have one drain and you cover it, you create a point of suction, and that point of suction is so strong that it can trap somebody on the bottom of a swimming pool. So the ideal situation was made a code a number of years ago, and all commercial pools should have a double main drain. It was a requirement that they go back and modify all those pools to meet the safety code. However, on residential pools, all the pools built since that have been built with that in place, but very old pools may still have a single drain. And if you're doing a pool remodel, I would highly recommend that you take that single drain and replace it with a double main drain. And so now that you have a double main drain, you have a much safer pool from an entrapment standpoint. So the other thing that's happened with the drains is the grates that have been done on those have been modified to create a anti-suction situation. So most of your drains at the bottom of the pool are domed. Therefore, it's hard to get something to lay flat on top of it. And so with the dome, the water's pulled in from the sides instead of from the top. And so that helps, So the drain that I use most commonly in the pools that I construct is actually a 4-foot long channel drain, and it pulls water from all sides. And there's a cool tray that goes in the middle of it that you can put whatever the pool finishes with the rest of the pool. So all that you see in the bottom of the pool is just a little slit all the way around. And so that is a very good drain. Was a very safe drain that's been out on the market for quite some time, and did not have to go through all the recalls that some of the drains that were on the market previously had to. So you want to make sure that all these suction lines that are in the pool are safe from a suction standpoint. So you have the grates and the covers on them to help prevent body and hair entrapment. They're the two things that you're looking at from a safety standpoint there. So we'll put some pictures on the website and on Instagram that kind of indicate several of these fences as well as the drains. One thing also with water safety is simply have your pool clean. So if your water's clear, it's much easier for people to keep an eye on everybody that's in the pool and see everything that's going on in the pool. If you have unclear water, that's something that could lead to an unsafe situation. So water clarity is something to think about as you look at having a safe environment for people to swim in. So the next thing we're going to talk about is diving. So a lot of people like to dive into a swimming pool. And so when we dive into a swimming pool, we've got to have areas that are safe to dive into. And so what the industry has created are what are called dive envelopes. Dive envelopes are based on certain measurements from certain locations to create a safe environment to dive into. Now, I have a lot of people that ask me if a diving board is a safe situation. So I like diving boards if you're going to have a deep pool. And the reason why is a couple of things. One, it puts you out over the water instead of on the edge of the water diving. So that's one of the first things to think about. The other thing about a diving board is there's only one place to dive safely in that swimming pool, and that's off the board. So if you have nothing and you have a deep end pool and we're like, well, we just don't like the board because it creates an unsafe situation. Well, it's not safe to dive everywhere on the end of that pool, because what happens when you dive in is you have a glide path. You're going to go down and you're going to go a certain distance in the pool. And what's understood is over the years is most people used to think, oh, the pool needs to be deeper to be safer. And if you go back to the 70s, back when I was growing up, most pools were 10 feet deep. And then they had what was called the break that came out of the 10-foot going up to the shallow area. And it was so steep, we used to call it the abyss. And you would go over the shallow area and all of a sudden you'd start sliding down into the abyss of the 10-foot drop. So it was a pretty steep situation. And what the industry realized is people didn't get hurt hitting the bottom of the pool. They got hurt hitting the break. And so people would dive off the pool and they would run into the break when they were on their glide path. And so the industry realized we don't have to be 10 feet deep on a swimming pool. We can be shallower, and it depends on what we're diving off of, on what that recommended depth is. But for most cases, you're going to start somewhere, 8.5 feet, somewhere in that region, depending, again, what you're diving off of. But the diving board allows you to dive safely into that depth. And then you have a glide path going up. And what they realize is that glide path, that break needed to be much longer, not short, where it was real steep. It needed to be flatter and longer to transition you up to the shallow end of the pool. And so if you had a pool that was like 8.5 feet deep and you had a nice break coming out of it, and that break needs to be no steeper than a 1-to-3 ratio coming up. And so they've got charts that tell you the exact dimensions that you need based on the apparatus that you're diving off of and the height that is, and gives you the depths and widths. And the widths the glide path are kind of shaped like a pear. As you're really close to the diving board, you need a really wide space, okay? And then as you go farther, it becomes narrower and narrower from a safety standpoint. And in that pear-shaped safety envelope, you can't have anything. You can't have a spa built there. You can't have a bench there. You can't have a tanning ledge there. You can't have anything in that space. It has to be uninterrupted so you can swim freely in that space when you dive off of whatever you dove off of. Now, another thing a lot of people ask me is, well, can I dive off of a platform? Well, if you're diving off an elevated platform, there's certain lengths, widths, and depths you have to have for that as well. And, I'm going to dive off a rock. Again, you have to have certain widths, lengths, and depths to dive safely off of that. So it's not like, and then some people say, well, it's not a diving, it's a jump stand, or it's a jump rock. We're just going to jump in. So if you're jumping in, somebody's going to dive in. So you want to make this safe situation created for a safe environment. So you're going to have your widths and lengths and depths for your diving profile to safely jump into a swimming pool. So again, if you're going to be doing that, there should be a chart that looks kind of something like this. Okay, you can see this chart here. We'll have a copy of the charts so people can check it out. But anybody that you're dealing with is building a diving pool for you should be showing you the chart that they're using for their diving apparatus so you have a safe situation that you're going into. We're trying to be better in showing pictures and illustrations of things to help you understand some of the concepts that we're talking about, available on Instagram and also on the YouTube channel as well. So we talked about you have to have a certain depth, you have to have a certain width. So most of the time I'm doing a dive envelope that's 15 feet wide. I'm going 8.5 feet deep. I've got a glide path at 32 feet. And so with those things, that usually works for what I'm going to try to do safety-wise. Now, there are some that are slightly smaller. Now, a lot of people think the city is going to make sure this is done properly. I only know of one city that enforces dive envelope safety standards. One, okay? I don't know any others that do it. So if you're going to assume that it's built safely, that's a wrong assumption, okay? So again, whoever you're working with, the professional that you're working with, has to see the ANSI minimum dive water envelope that they've done in your pool to meet what they're trying to do for your situation. So, they should be following those standards and everybody should be good, not have any problems on what's going to be going on. So slides also have a envelope, safety envelope, certain width, certain length, certain depths that are needed for those as well. And again, the manufacturer of that particular piece of equipment will have an envelope that will specify exactly what has to be done. Typically, they're not as big as diving envelopes, but you want to follow what the manufacturer is doing to make sure that you get the right situation. So people have asked me, so can I have the steps in the dive envelope? No. Can I have a ladder in the pool? No. Can I have a bench in there, swim out? No. Can there be the pool wall in the dive envelope? No. The spa? No. So you can't have anything in that safety envelope. That's how you stay safe. Okay. So when you have a diving situation, one thing that you're going to have is you're going to have an exit point. So you have to have a primary exit point in a pool. But if you have a deep end that's deeper than 5 feet, you have to have an exit point in conjunction with that deep end. So if someone dives in and they don't have to swim all the way to the other end of the pool to get out of the pool safely with a bench or steps or something like that, there has to be an exit point in that situation. So the other thing that comes into play when we have a pool that's over 30 feet wide is you have to have exit points on both sides of the pool. Now, if you got a 30-foot wide residential pool, that's a pretty big pool. And, of course, you'd want exit points on both sides because you don't want to walk all the way around the pool to get in and out of the pool. So that's something also to consider when you look at the application that you're going to get out of the deep end. One thing also is pool steps. A lot of people are like, I don't understand the pool steps, after they gunite the pool, they seem really steep. So the industry maximum riser is 12-inch uniform steps. So if you've got 12-inch uniform steps, that meets the safety. Now the top riser can vary in height, but cannot exceed 12 inches. So that's something that you want to look at is your steps in your pool. Now people are like, well, inside the house, 12-inch step is way beyond. Well, in a pool, you have water, which creates some buoyancy. So that's why a typical situation going into a swimming pool is you're going to have 3 steps going down to the bottom of the pool from the coping itself. So basically, there's going to be 4 steps going down. You step down to the top one, then the second one, which a lot of times is a bench. Then you have a third one, and then you go to the 4. And so that's what you need from a safety standpoint going into the pool is you're going to have some steps going into the pool. So I have a question about slides.
Okay.
So this was brought up in another question that we had. This is my question. So years ago, when I worked at Jeremiah Pools, we built some slides in place. And those slides were typically covered with glass tile or something that made that a slick surface to go down into. And they were generally fairly well incorporated with the other elements, so they blend in quite nicely. And there was a case where a child went down one of those slides and received back or neck injuries, and there was a lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, Jeremiah Pools quit building slides because what came up was the slide was not engineered by anybody from a safety standpoint. The materials were not specified to create a certain coefficient of friction. People just put something in, and how well it worked was totally random. So there wasn't certain heights or slopes or any of those type of things. So I quit doing slides altogether. And then I ran into Dolphin Slides, Dolphin Slides came from the commercial swimming pool world. And they made a residential line. And on their residential line, they specify exactly, based on the slide, what the height is going to be and the length of the slide and how it's to be performed. And so now you have a slide that is safe to use because it's engineered as a slide. That's what it's meant to be. You know, we're not taking a playground slide and putting it into a pool and saying, oh, that's going to be safe, or a playground tube slide and doing that type of situation. There was a lot of people that did those things early in the industry. But to manufacture your own slide today, I think you're doing that at a huge risk for the homeowner and the contractor.
I would agree. You know, one of the things that's really prevalent in Phoenix and probably in other markets that I'm not aware of is they do a lot of artificial rock work. And so what happens is, okay, you'll have a homeowner that'll ask, I want a rock waterfall and slide.
Right.
And very often it was made out of artificial rock work. And there were some guys that were pretty good at it. And then there's stuff that just looks terrible.
Right.
It looks awful, but you're exactly right. This stuff is not engineered. It's not really, there's not even any code written on how you would even put together an artificial rock waterfall, how it should be constructed, all the ins and outs of dimensions, safety, everything. There isn't anything. And I think people are putting themselves at a lot of risk for liability for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They look great. Okay. So maybe backtrack a second. Some of them look great.
Well, one of the things I noticed when we were in San Antonio was there's some artificial rock work there along the Riverwalk.
Yes.
If you look close enough, you can see it. And it looks like it was pretty well done. Some of it looks like it has faded a little bit, but it actually looked pretty good. Here in Texas, there's just not the rocks to work with that we have in Phoenix and Southern California, where you get these surface select boulders that, they look really natural, and they come in all different sizes, and you can make some spectacular stuff. But without shipping that rock here, you're using a rock that's available here. But I haven't seen any artificial rock work here than what I saw down in San Antonio. But I haven't looked hard.
It's not prevalent here, partly because there's a lot of stone in Austin, and there's a lot of stone in Oklahoma, relatively close to both of our markets that, works very well. And so that style of pool hasn't been done a whole lot recently, but it's available.
Well, you're working on a pool right now. You just showed me some pictures of it. It's got all kinds of rock work on it. So they're being built.
Yeah, that's a crazy pool, and all the stone, because those two stone choices were the wrong color. Mm-hmm. It all came from Colorado, and it will be a pretty cool project when it's done here shortly. It should be done in a couple months.
So the question you were asking had to do with the liability aspects.
Well, the safety issue for both the consumer and the contractor is, I think it's best to use a slide that's designed as a water slide. And Dolphin makes one, and so does, I believe it's Interfab or SR Smith makes one as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you've got a cup because, it's just, they're safer. They're going to be safer because they're engineered.
Right. So that I just wanted to address that issue. So, okay. Another thing to consider is handholds. So what do we need a handhold for? So if we have a pool that exceeds 4 feet in depth, we need to have a handhold around the edge of the pool from a safety standpoint. Now, a handhold has to be accessible within 4 feet, but not to exceed 8 feet. So I've got a space in there between those 2 points inside the pool. I need to be able to grab onto something if I'm in water that's over 4 feet deep. In case I don't know how to swim, I got to hold on to something. So that could be the deck, it could be coping, it could be a ledge that's not more than 12 inches above the water line. So if we've got a tall water wall along there, there needs to be something that we can hold on to. So from a safety standpoint, also rocks or masonry joints or tool joints, they'll allow a handhold within 12 inches of the water line. So you want to look for something that you can hold on to. You could also have a ladder or an underwater seat or ledge in those spaces. Okay, so I don't have a handhold, so I'm going to put a bench there so I can safely rest on the bench. That's not a problem. Or you can put a secure rope or a rail to hold on to. So that's something. Or it says any finish or design that affords a single handhold within 12 inches of the water line. So that you can have a combination of things to create that, but you want to have something where people can hold on to something if you've got a raised wall area. So safely, someone swims over to that side, you got something to hold on to or rest on, like a bench, from a safety standpoint. Another thing that you need is, if you have a body of water, you have to have a pool light. So you need to be able to light that from a safety standpoint. So just like you want water clarity during the day, you want to be able to see into this basin of water at night and see what's there. So those are some other things to consider from a safety standpoint. Now, as I mentioned earlier, and you may have fast forwarded to the end so you could get to the barbecue bits, which we're going to get to in just a second. So, but we are on YouTube. That's something that you may want to check out. There's a lot of different subjects that we've tied into. So if you need to search for something, you can do that. And you can get on there. And also, if you want to see me and Kevin and our guests, we're on there. If you really want to watch us, that's certainly possible. And so check us out on YouTube on our channel. So it's Poolside Perspectives Podcast. So pretty easy to find. So Next week, what we're going to talk about from a water safety standpoint is alarms. And we're going to talk about alarms with the pool. We're going to talk about alarms with children. We're going to talk about door alarms. We're also going to talk about some AI. That's some new stuff that's available. So those are things that you may want to check out next week. So if you have questions or stories that help you understand things or want to explain things or you want us to explain something, please feel free to contact us on our social media. Also on the website, there's a place you can submit your questions. And so please do that. And we'd love to answer those as well. As you did notice again today, Kevin's not with us. Kevin probably for about the next 4 weeks, next 4 months is going to be receiving chemotherapy and radiation. And so that's going to severely impact his voice because where he's getting the radiation is in the area of his jaw and tongue and everything like that. So keep him in your thoughts and prayers. I greatly appreciate that. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. And, check out the barbecue bits that's coming up next by Barbecue Outfitters or by Texas Outfitters. And we'll look forward to talking to you sometime soon. Take care.
All right, so here's another type of griddle, Bobby. Tell us about this one.
So let's go back to the conversation we had on the Evo where we talked about let's go through discovery phase with the customer and find out if we're going to do a connection piece to that unit, or is this going to be in the inline bar where the cooking equipment is. So this is more of the inline bar that's going to have the grill or the cooking center. This is a special griddle. Why is it special? Well, it's made in Texas. We like that. It was from France last year. They moved the facility down in South Texas. And what makes this griddle special? You can get it any fuel source. It also comes in electric. So the 2-zone comes in electric. Let me give the zone 1. You've got a 2-zone, and they make a 3-zone. Also, it's all stainless steel, 304 stainless, as you'd seen in our other casts. What's 304 stainless? It has a high quality of chromium and nickel in it, will not pit or rust. But what is the secret ingredient to this griddle? It's a dual plate technology. So the bottom of this cast iron is grafted to the stainless steel plate, and the energy off of these U-burners create a really, really even surface, and you do not get a carcinogen burn in. Ease of use as far as cleaning, no special oils. If I were to cook on this grill, I would turn it on, hit olive oil, and I'm ready to cook right now.
And that would be different than the Evo?
It is. Evo is going to be, you've got to watch heat management with Evo. It's extremely hot. It taps out at about 550, 600 degrees, but you'll find that you will not burn on this particular vehicle versus other griddles. Where's the grease relief at? People are looking at us right now. Hey, where's the grease go? Yeah, well, it goes right into here. I can line this with aluminum foil and then drag the product here. How do I clean it? You get a cleaning, you want to buy a cleaning kit, you got a rigid scraper, you'll turn the unit up high, and then you'll put ice on here. And then ice counteracts with the heat under the plate, and then you just scrape it off, and then you only use a scrubber that's recommended for this. So it's very easy to use.
So what's the dimensions on that?
You can go into this one's 16, this one's 30, and then we're 36 to 37 on the 3-zone.
So for a consumer, ease of use sort of sounds to me like you're saying that one might be easier to maintain and cook on than maybe something like that, which might require a little more skill.
It is in space too. If they want that particular experience, I can go 1-zone dedicated, 2 or 3. These also come with liners. We know that some of our customers like to do nature cast companies or custom cabinetry. You can build this in, and then the griddle sits inside of here. And then this is not a cooking lid down like a grill. This is a steam lid. It does 2 things. It keeps it clean, keeps bird bombs off of it when I'm not using it, but then you'll have a water bottle in here. You'll find out where your temperature is when you hit water with it. When the water begins to bounce, that's your starting point to cook. If I were to put patties on here and flip them and put my cheese, I would hit water over here, squirt water on it, pull it down, and 10 to 15 seconds, quick steam, and the cheese melts without having to melt onto the product here or to the plates. Yeah.
So to your point, this works really well in that inline layout. That's kind of like a destination place. Hey, let's go to the teppanyaki grill and cook.
It is. And not to just shine on these two products like Evo and LeGriddle, every company that we showed you, Alfresco has a 30-inch griddle that component flows with everything that they sell. It just depends on the questions, discovery phase questions. We ask the customer, hey, how do you see entertaining? How do you see cooking? What would you like to learn how to cook? Those type of discovery phase questions will lead us into what type of component we sell.
And don't you guys do something on the weekends here where you're like showcasing cooking on certain things?
We do. We're a big ceramic store. We always have been. You'll see us with the pellet grill in the front. We'll get to that next segment in a little bit. We always cook in front of our store. Do we do samples? No, we just, we cook for ourselves, but we also show how the equipment operates live, and that helps vernacular and some of the customers understanding how to do that. So.
Got it. It's cool.